The hand that grabs Dean Martin's shoulder isn't friendly. It isn't a fan asking for an autograph. It isn't a waiter offering champagne. It is a hand that has broken bones, a hand that has collected debts in back alleys from San Pedro to Santa Monica, a hand that belongs to a man named Sal, who weighs 260 pounds and hasn't smiled since 1947. Dean doesn't turn around. Not yet. He takes a slow drag from his cigarette and watches the smoke curl upward into the California night. The jasmine smells sweet. The pool glows turquoise. The laughter from inside sounds expensive, but the man walking toward him isn't laughing. He is 5'5", immaculately dressed. His shoes shine like mirrors. His pinky ring catches the moonlight, a diamond that could buy a house in the valley. And his eyes are the coldest thing Dean Martin has ever seen. "Dino," Mickey Cohen says, stopping 3 feet away. "We need to talk, alone." Dean looks at Mickey's hand, then at Mickey's face, then at the 2 bodyguards flanking him like granite statues, and he says something that should get him killed. "You and me, Mickey, we're the same." The words hang in the night air. Sal's hand tightens on Dean's shoulder, but Mickey raises one finger, just one, and Sal freezes. What happens in the next 4 minutes will decide whether Dean Martin walks out of this garden alive, or whether he becomes another body that Los Angeles conveniently forgets. To understand what happened that night in Brentwood, you have to understand who Mickey Cohen was. And more importantly, you have to understand what he wasn't. It was 1956, and Mickey Cohen controlled Los Angeles the way a conductor controls an orchestra, with precision, with violence, and with an absolute intolerance for anyone who played the wrong note. They called him the King of the Sunset Strip. He owned nightclubs, bookmakers, politicians, and police officers. He had 200 suits and a pathological fear of germs that made him wash his hands 40 times a day. But Mickey Cohen wasn't like the Vegas boys. He wasn't smooth like the men who ran the Sands or the Flamingo. He was wilder, more unpredictable, more dangerous. When Bugsy Siegel took 6 bullets to the face in 1947, Mickey had inherited the entire West Coast operation. His house in Brentwood looked normal from the outside, white stucco, Spanish tile roof, but inside it was a fortress. But here's what most people didn't know about Mickey Cohen. Before he was a gangster, he was a boxer, a professional fighter from the smoky arenas of Cleveland, Ohio. The same desperate circuits that had produced another Ohio fighter, a kid from Steubenville named Dino Crossetti. Dean had learned to use his fists before he learned to sing. In the back rooms of Steubenville's illegal casinos, he had thrown punches for money, for survival. His father had cut hair in a barbershop on the south side of town. His mother had held the family together through the Depression, and young Dino had learned that sometimes the only way out was through. Jimmy Porter had been tending bar at Mickey Cohen's parties for 3 years. He had seen things, deals made over champagne, threats delivered with a smile, men who arrived laughing and left in ambulances. He didn't ask questions. He didn't take sides. He didn't remember faces or names. That was how you survived in Mickey Cohen's world. But what he saw that night, that he would never forget. Dean Martin had been invited as a guest, an entertainer. By the end of the night he would be something else entirely, a target, or a legend. The party was everything you'd expect from Mickey Cohen. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across the marble floors. A 12-piece orchestra played Cole Porter. Women in diamonds floated past like expensive ghosts. Men in silk suits stood in clusters, their laughter a little too sharp, their eyes a little too watchful. The smell of Cuban cigars mixed with French perfume, the sound of ice clinking in crystal glasses, the feel of money, old money, new money, dirty money hanging in the air like fog. Dean arrived at 9 o'clock with a bottle of bourbon and that famous smile. He didn't bring security. He didn't bring Frank or Sammy or any of the boys. He walked in alone and within 10 minutes had half the room laughing at a joke about a priest and a showgirl. But Mickey had been watching, not the way a fan watches a star, the way a predator watches prey, calculating, patient, waiting for the right moment to strike. Dean couldn't ignore it. He had felt eyes on him before, fans, producers, jealous husbands. But this was different. This was the gaze of a man who was used to getting exactly what he wanted. Jimmy Porter noticed it first. He was behind the bar, polishing glasses that didn't need polishing, when he saw Mickey's eyes follow Dean across the room. He had seen that look before, usually right before someone disappeared. "Mr. Martin seems to be enjoying himself," Jimmy said to no one in particular. The man next to him, one of Mickey's accountants, just shook his head. Everybody enjoys themselves at Mickey's parties, until they don't. Dean worked the room like the professional he was. A handshake here, a wink there. He didn't drink the bourbon he was carrying. It was a prop, like everything else about the Dean Martin persona. But he wasn't stupid. He had felt Mickey's eyes on him all night, and he knew this wasn't just a party. At 11:15, Sal appeared at Dean's elbow. Mr. Cohen would like to see you, in his office. It wasn't a request. Dean followed Sal through the crowd. The orchestra kept playing. The guests kept laughing. But Jimmy Porter watched Dean disappear down a hallway, and something cold settled in his chest. Mickey's office was in the back of the house. Soundproof walls, no windows, and in the corner, hanging on a brass hook, was a pair of boxing gloves. Old gloves, cracked red leather, faded laces, the gloves of a young man who had fought his way out of Cleveland's slums with nothing but his fists. Dean noticed them immediately. His eyes lingered on the cracked leather. Then he looked at Mickey, who was standing behind his desk with a glass of milk in his hand. "Nice place," Dean said, his voice easy, relaxed. Mickey didn't smile. "Sit down, Dino." Dean didn't sit. He walked to the corner and stood next to the boxing gloves, close enough to touch them. "These yours? From a long time ago. Cleveland, right? I heard you were pretty good." Mickey's jaw tightened. "I was better than good. I was going to be a champion, until I figured out there was easier money in other things." Dean's fingers brushed against the gloves. "Funny thing about fighters, you never really stop being one, even when you're wearing a silk suit and drinking milk at your own party." The room went quiet. Sal took a step forward, but Mickey raised that single finger, and Sal stopped like he had hit a wall. "I didn't bring you back here to talk about boxing, Dino. I'm opening a new club, downtown, very exclusive, very profitable, and I want you to headline." Dean didn't react. He knew what Mickey Cohen's clubs were really about. He knew what happened to entertainers who asked too many questions. "That's quite an offer," Dean said. "It's the only offer you're going to get. And if I say no..." Mickey stopped walking. He was close now, close enough for Dean to smell the soap on his hands, the starch in his collar. "Nobody says no to me, Dino." Mickey's voice was soft, almost gentle. "Nobody." The silence stretched. Dean's hand was still touching the boxing gloves. The cracked leather felt rough against his fingers. Old, worn, honest in a way that nothing else in this room was honest. And in that moment, Dean Martin made a decision. The kind of decision you can't take back. "I appreciate the offer, Mickey." Dean's voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes before a storm. "But I'm going to pass." The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Mickey didn't move. He didn't blink. He didn't look away. He didn't signal his men. He just stood there, waiting to see what this fool from Steubenville would do next. Sal's hand moved toward his jacket, but Mickey raised one finger. Just one, and Sal froze. "Nobody passes on me, Dino." Mickey's voice was barely above a whisper. "Nobody. Not governors. Not movie stars. Not even Frank Sinatra." Dean reached into his pocket. Slowly. Every eye in the room tracked his hand. Dean pulled out a cigarette. He lit it with a silver lighter, the same lighter his father had given him 20 years ago, back in Steubenville, back when Dino Crossetti was just a kid with fast hands and faster dreams. He took a long drag, and then he looked at Mickey Cohen, the most dangerous man in Los Angeles, and smiled. "You and me, Mickey," Dean whispered. "We're the same." Something flickered behind Mickey's eyes. Something old, something buried. "Two fighters from Ohio," Dean continued. "You came up in Cleveland. I came up in Steubenville. Different cities, same story. We both learned to use our hands before we learned anything else." He took another drag. Let the silence stretch. "The difference is," he whispered, "I figured out which fights are worth winning." Dean nodded toward the boxing gloves on the wall. "You keep those gloves because they remind you of who you were. Before all this, before you became what they made you become." Mickey's hands curled into fists at his sides. "So thanks for the offer," Dean said, stubbing out his cigarette. "But I don't do business with people who can't take no for an answer." The silence that followed lasted exactly 12 seconds. Jimmy couldn't breathe. He couldn't move. He couldn't tear his eyes away from what was happening. He had crept down the hallway, holding a tray of drinks no one had ordered, his heart pounding so hard he was certain everyone could hear it. And then something extraordinary happened. Mickey Cohen looked at the boxing gloves, really looked at them, for the first time in years. The cracked leather, the faded laces, the gloves of a 17-year-old kid from Cleveland who had believed he could punch his way to a better life. And something in Mickey's face changed. The mask slipped. Just for a moment. Just long enough for Jimmy Porter to see what was underneath. Not the gangster, not the killer. Just a tired man who had forgotten what it felt like to be respected instead of feared. Mickey laughed. Not the cold laugh he used to intimidate. A real laugh, surprised and genuine. "You got stones, Dino," Mickey said, shaking his head. "Real stones." Mickey walked to his private bar and pulled out a bottle of scotch. The good stuff. He poured 2 glasses. Handed one to Dean. "Most guys, they hear my name, they piss themselves. They say yes to everything. They smile and nod and spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulder." He raised his glass. "You just walked into my office, told me no, and compared me to a washed-up boxer from Cleveland. Dean clinked his glass against Mickey's. I didn't say washed up. You didn't have to. Mickey took a sip. I like you, Dino. Against my better judgment, I actually like you. You ever need anything? Mickey whispered, low enough that not even Sal could hear. Anything at all, you come to me. No strings, just one Ohio boy helping another. Dean finished his scotch. I appreciate that, Mickey, but you're still not going to work for me. No. Dean smiled. I'm not. Dean Martin walked out of Mickey Cohen's office that night with something more valuable than any business deal. He walked out with Mickey Cohen's respect. The story could have ended there, but stories about Mickey Cohen never ended clean. 3 weeks later, 2 men from Jack Dragna's crew walked into Patsy's Italian restaurant. They found Dean eating spaghetti alone, reading the racing form. Mr. Dragna wants to talk to you about some business opportunities. Dean didn't flinch. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't call for help. He didn't even look up from his racing form. Tell Mr. Dragna I'm not interested in business opportunities. I'm interested in spaghetti. The second man reached for Dean's shoulder. He never made contact. A third man had appeared at the table. Mr. Cohen sends his regards. He suggests you gentlemen find somewhere else to eat. Another city, maybe. Another state. The 2 men from Dragna's crew couldn't leave fast enough. Word spread through the Los Angeles underworld before midnight. Dean Martin was under Mickey Cohen's protection. And nobody wanted to answer to Mickey personally. Jimmy Porter kept tending bar for another 5 years, until Mickey went to prison in 1961. Decades later, when a journalist tracked him down, Jimmy finally talked. I never saw anyone as tough as Dean Martin that night. Not because he threw a punch, he whispered. Because he didn't have to. The boxing gloves are gone now. Mickey Cohen's Brentwood house was sold in 1962 while Mickey sat in Alcatraz. The new owners gutted the place, turned the soundproof office into a nursery. They had no idea what kind of history lived in those walls. The gloves themselves disappeared. Maybe they ended up in a collector's vault. Maybe they were thrown away. But somewhere, those gloves still exist. The gloves that Dean Martin looked at when he told the King of the Sunset Strip that they were the same. Mickey couldn't have known it then, but that conversation would be one of the last real moments of connection he would ever have. Within 5 years he would be in Alcatraz, alone with his regrets. We all face moments like that. Maybe not in a gangster's office. Maybe not with armed guards blocking the door. But we all face moments when someone more powerful wants something we're not willing to give. When saying no could cost us everything. We all have to choose. Do we bend, or do we stand? And we all carry something from where we came from. Dean Martin carried his fists. Mickey Cohen carried his. A kid from Steubenville, and a kid from Cleveland. 2 fighters who had learned the same lessons in different arenas. In that moment in Brentwood, those 2 histories recognized each other. Mickey Cohen controlled Los Angeles for nearly 20 years. Hundreds of men, millions of dollars. Dean Martin walked into his house with nothing but a smile and a pack of cigarettes. 4 minutes in a garden. 1 conversation. 2 fighters from Ohio. So the next time you see a clip of Dean Martin on stage, that easy smile, that casual grace, remember the garden, remember the gangster, remember the boxing gloves on the wall, and remember the 4 words that saved his life. We're the same, Mickey. So here's my question for you. What would you have said to Mickey Cohen that night? Would you have taken the deal? Would you have walked away? Or would you have done what Dean did, looked a killer in the eye and told him you were the same? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story moved you, if you want to hear more untold stories about the King of Cool, hit that subscribe button and the bell. This is Dean Martin, Untold Stories.